close my camera off just for 1 second so I can start the recording. I'll be right back. Okay. Well, any pretty uninteresting news week, right? Um, Lots of stuff going on. We are very excited that Trump is safe and not dead. That was very
Yeah,
scary. So we'll start off by saying that. Um, and there's a lot of news going on in the tech world, government
yeah,
world. Everything's political. I don't mean to make the show political, but it's like
no,
everything
no,
becomes political. I'm reading the tech stories; they're getting affected by politics and vice versa. So,
yeah,
um,
yeah. I'm so tired of reading about the politics. I can't stand it.
yeah, yeah.
It's only
Hearing
beginning,
about it,
Pete. And it's only beginning, Pete.
huh?
And it's only just beginning.
Hasn't even
Yeah,
started.
yeah. I don't know if I can bear it, but I guess I can. Yeah,
Well, um, well, as you may have heard, Trump picked his vice president yesterday, JD Vance. And from a technology point of view, I just did some. I don't know much about him as a politician, but I did find an interesting story from Reuters, um,
Reuters.
Reuters. Thank you. And he has been very outspoken against uh, the antitrust enforcement that is going on against some of the big major corporations. You may remember we were talking about Apple going through a major FTC lawsuit, uh, huge multi-billion dollar lawsuit, basically saying that Apple's a monopoly and that they make their products unfriendly for other developers, and they are even what's the word, oppressive to their customers, basically by forcing you to buy certain to stay in their ecosystem. Another way to say that is they make their products too good and their customers are too addicted to them and they can't leave. That would be another way to put that, in my opinion.
yeah,
But he has been very outspoken, and I pulled one quote from this article in Reuters, um, which said, I'm doing a different form of note taking today. I have physical pieces of paper instead of
yeah, yeah. Old
using.
fashioned, huh?
I'm not sure if this is going to work well for me. I'm already not liking it. It's way harder to turn a page and scan than to scroll on a mouse. But
So the headline I just saw was that Bob Menendez was convicted of his influence peddling. With
No,
so
yeah,
I guess that we
yeah,
none of us are surprised, but
yeah.
oh my
I
gosh, we
guess,
just needed that.
yeah. We don't need to worry about him anymore. Not that I was.
Right.
Goldberg Bob.
oh, hey Stu, how's it going?
He hid gold bars inside his suit coat in his closet and claimed he was innocent.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right.
Well,
Goldberg Bob.
Yeah, well, JD Vance in this article in Reuters said it's long overdue, but it's time to break Google up. And this is from it's a tweet that he sent out in February. He said that monopolistic control of information in our society resides with an explicitly progressive technology company. And now it's still an election year, so I think you kind of don't, you
yeah.
can't
talk, talk is cheap.
Talk is cheap. Yeah, talk is very, very cheap right now. It's about as cheap as it can be. Um, but I thought that was interesting because it's somewhat related to a lot of the antitrust talk that we've been covering in here. And Stu sent me an email last week, I think actually right after Tuesday, where we talked about Apple observing on OpenAI's board. And then he shortly after the meeting here, he sent me another news story that said Microsoft had dropped their seat on the OpenAI board, and the rumors are this is because of regulatory scrutiny, specifically about this antitrust lawsuit and kind of general atmosphere around big companies having a little bit of concern about being considered monopolies. So, yeah, Microsoft has withdrawn its seat on OpenAI's board, and Apple will no longer be able to appoint an executive to a similar role amid regulatory scrutiny of big tech's relationship with artificial intelligence startups.
I think we'll see less antitrust activities under Trump than we have under Biden. And under Biden, I really don't think it's been that aggressive in itself. So there are the problem is that is it a monopoly and evil if you get there because you're the best in the block? I mean, and some of these products, they're just head and shoulders above the alternative, and that's why they're as big as they are. What you look for is they're sort of less than a top-notch product, but they're using their economic power to strengthen their position, not because it's such a good product. So where that takes us is I'm not convinced that the U.S. is going to see a lot of breakup in the high-tech area. Just because of that, I think they're there because they're the best in the block in the world. And it's, of course, to our interest that we do have economic engines that are world leaders. It's why I so fear this loss of stature with Boeing, because that's one of those blocks like Silicon Valley, like Hollywood. Those are and the investment banking community in New York. Those are major underpinning blocks of our economy. And to lose the Boeing power situation, now it may come back, and I hope it does. But the reality is we're not as strong as a nation with a weak Boeing as we are with a strong Boeing.
Yeah,
Boeing's problems are self-induced.
I absolutely agree, Stu. Absolutely.
I don't know much
I mean,
about Boeing. My question to you guys is, the nature of technology is, I mean, to put a political lens on it, to me, it seems fascist or totalitarian. Like technology eats everything. It's absolutely a hierarchy, and the people who have the Googles and the Apples and the Microsofts, they rule with an iron fist. If they want you to be on their platform, you'll be allowed. If they want you off, they can wipe everything away from you in an instant. There's very little recourse. Us as users of these services, as an iPhone user, we have no control, necessarily at all of what's being stored by Apple, even though we trust that they store our entire life. My entire life is on iCloud, and in other places. I back up to an external hard drive, several external hard drives, and I put my photos in different places. But if my iCloud were to be corrupted, or if I were to do something, that broke the law and Apple seized it, there's lots of stories out there that's happened to people, and there's no recourse. And so from
Well,
that point
don't
of
break the
view,
law.
sorry,
Don't break the law.
of course,
There you
but
go.
that's what all the dictators say, right? As long as you're, that's a tale often told, I think. as long as you're on the good side, but what's the good side? And if the good side's always changing, there's this, I think we mentioned the story, a guy who had Google everything, Google phone, Google computer, all of his stuff was in Google Calendar, Google Contacts. He sent an image of his toddler's private parts to a doctor, or he sent it to his wife to upload to a doctor portal because there was some infection or something. Google flagged that as CP, child sexual imaging, probably by an algorithm, and immediately locked his entire Google presence. So he lost his Gmail, he lost his calendar, he lost his contacts, he lost his photos. Everything that he had was on Google's services. And he was not able to get it back. He was not even able to talk to anybody. And there was a huge article about it in the New York Post. He had been trying to appeal this process for years and no response from Google. And there's, in that case, I feel for it because it's like his whole life is gone. He lost all of his photos, all of his contacts, all of his calendars, all of his emails, in a digital world, that's like being exiled, right? So, so yeah, in that case, that's the counterpoint. I agree with you, Stu. I'm not breaking the law, but I do know that things happen. The internet's a weird place. You don't necessarily understand how these algorithms work. And in that, that's a good example of somebody who was just, it seemed like I could imagine any of us doing something like that. And then all of your stuff's gone forever.
Matt, I'm picking up on your feeling that you use the word fascist as far as the behavior of some of the big tech firms. They're omnipotent, they get to set the rules, nobody gets to protest it, and you don't like it. And if somebody with your background, your education, your political mindset uses the word fascist, which normally I would have expected to come, from a progressive or far left political. So what I'm saying is that rings an alarm in my head that Matt would not be saying this. This is not Matt. There's nothing political about Matt using that word fascist. And so that just goes off an alarm, and that I ought to listen to Matt and think about Matt. And one of the things I would observe is that I implicitly talked about it's to our advantage that we have these really strong high-tech companies, Silicon Valley based. But we've got to remember they may be more of a world company than a US company. And, many times we have thought, like Boeing, we think of as a US company, and it probably is. And we need that if we ever go to war. But so many big high tech and other companies are world companies. They have zero interest in any national boundary or national goodwill. All they care about is their own financial longevity, prosperity, and wealth. And they view themselves as world citizens, not US citizens. So that is, I'm talking to myself here. Hey, Chuck, be careful assuming that these guys are long-term assets of the US. They may not be at all.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely be careful. And just to clear the record, that's what I see it as. I'm not putting a this is bad or this is good filter on it. I see it as fascist because when I look at it, you just said it. That's exactly what it appears to be in reality. They're
Yeah.
accountable to pretty much no one. They're kind of a black box. They themselves will say, in the case of Google's algorithm, there's plenty of reporting out there that says nobody actually understands Google's algorithm. No one person actually understands the entire thing. So they don't really, so if their own company or their own people don't even understand how this behemoth machine works, and they're not accountable to anybody, and they have immense power over you. You and I can't go out and make an iPhone. You and I can't go out and make a MacBook, and there's really, and even if we did, you can create a computer, but then are you going to be able to create the software that runs it? Are we going to be able to code our own version of Microsoft Word? Are we going to be able to connect it to the internet so that we can share it? easily it's like, huge barriers of entry. And that's not even talking about social media. And what you said is a good point. You have to think of these as global companies. Another way to think of it actually is like as countries. They're almost, if you look at the revenue and the amount of money that these companies bring in, Apple specifically, Microsoft, Google, like if you compared them to the other countries' GDPs, I guarantee you they'd be in the top 10 or 20. Like if Apple was a country, right? It's up there as a huge, and I think that would be a good thing to run through Perplexity. But so yeah, that's how I see them. When I look at Mark Zuckerberg, I look at him like a king. Same thing with Tim Cook at Apple. Because he can turn on or off your water, digitally speaking. So yeah, that's just what I see it as. I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing. We're in a tough spot because these tech companies are really the US's major exports today. We don't do much manufacturing anymore. If you look at the companies who bring in the most money in the US, it's services, and technology is at the top of that. Apple and Microsoft and Google. They are our darlings. They are our business. They're the backbone, I think, of our economy in the new sense, in the like what is keeping America at the top of everybody's minds innovation wise. So
And there's, from my vantage point, and I even heard it on Biden's speech yesterday, they used the word corporate greed. And it's a term that's you hear more and more often, corporate greed. So what is corporate greed? Is that a corporation doing what it's supposed to do, trying to make money? Is there a cap beyond which you're making too much money and therefore you're greedy? Yeah, I don't I don't understand the term, and it demonizes these companies, not just the behemoths that you're talking about, but anyone. Walmart is a behemoth, and people think they sell, I mean, they sell $1 billion worth of goods a day. And is is that being greedy? It's so the mindset of about half the country is that making money is bad, and they put a word on it, greed, that connotates it's bad, and it's sort of the underpinning of our capitalistic society. I don't know where I'm going with what I'm saying. It's just an observation.
Yeah, it's a poor word to be using like that, I think. I
yeah,
agree.
my dad always told me, um, it's interesting when you're a kid, everybody tells you you can do whatever you want. If you work hard, you can become
Right.
rich, successful. And then he's like, then people become rich and successful, and then
Well,
everybody says you're greedy and you're a terrible person and you should pay all of your money to taxes.
Matt, you raised the question, or somebody raised the question, where do these companies fit in the ranking of nations relative to GDP? Well, first of all, you can't compare a $3 trillion market cap to a $3 trillion gross domestic product. They are different numbers. But order of magnitude, it's still interesting to look at that. And there are only 7 countries in the world that have more than $3 trillion in gross domestic product. And it's the last one is 7th is France, and then Britain, and somewhere in there China, and Russia's way down the list beyond that. But it says they are big, powerful entities, and big as powerful as many nations are.
That's really interesting. Thanks for pulling that up. And I think you're totally right that you can't compare market cap to GDP. Countries are completely different than companies. One thing I will add though is if you think about how much Okay, kind of a tangent, but what really runs, the world? And when I look at who has the most power, it's like intelligence agencies. That's what it seems to be on my end. CIA, the Mossad, the FBI. They really have like leverage, I would say. And what gives them leverage is their information, their intelligence. And, look at my hand right now. I have an Apple Watch. And if you think of like Google's and Apple's information that they have access to, the intelligence that they have from the data that they collect, that's where it really starts to get staggering to me. Past the financial level, like if you how much they know about everything. And of course, they're all working with intelligence agencies and governments also. But that's what to me really makes that comparison. I don't know how to compare it. I'm just kind of putting it out there on the table. That it's staggering to me to think, Tim Cook has, and of course, we don't even know. We really have no idea what they have access to and what they don't. Apple's brand has always been privacy. But again, you gotta trust them. They
Well, you
said,
hope they're not
they said
completely
actually,
immoral people. I mean,
Right.
they're human beings. They go to the bathroom every day. Uh, they get tired. They get sleepy. But you hope they're just not completely immoral and going to do something evil. But you don't know. I understand.
totally same thing with countries, right? You would think a
Yeah,
country would want to just
yeah. Well,
dominate every country, but sometimes they do.
yeah.
Yeah, it was actually interesting, kind of tying that back in. There was a report that the shooter or the attempted assassination shooter, uh, if you notice, he didn't have any social media that was public, and there was reporting that the FBI couldn't get into his phone, and I thought that was interesting. Because it's like we hear all the time about how much our data is being harvested and how companies can get into everything. But in this case, they weren't able to get into the phone of the shooter. So that's either really good news for Apple users. I think he had an iPhone. It should make you feel really good about Apple's got your back on privacy. Or if you're a tinfoil hat type of person, that probably sets off some major conspiracy concerns.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, so that's the old antitrust. I don't know. Everything that I'm seeing in the news with technology is that companies, I've never really seen this before, but all the big companies are seeming to be very aware PR wise of not looking like a monopoly. Um, and I don't know how they can make the case that they're not a monopoly, any of these companies. And I don't know if that's even a bad thing. And so that was kind of my question to you guys. We've already been discussing it, but you know, there's no stopping Apple, really. There's no stopping Microsoft. We as peasants, as little feudal lords, are gonna not be able to challenge the supremacy of our leaders. But are we concerned with that? Are we okay with that? Are you just kind of I guess it's that's my question, which we've already kind of discussed. But any more comments on major tech companies being monopolies? Does that concern you, or do you trust?
It's sort of like that word greed. Where where is the cap that you have to exceed to become a monopoly, and who sets that cap? I mean,
Well,
big, just because it's big doesn't necessarily connotate something bad. But in people's minds, if one industry, Standard Oil, whatever, Vanderbilt, any of the titans of business throughout our history exceed a certain point in someone's mind, and hopefully they're not evil, Pete, who's making those decisions. You got to break them up. And I don't know who, it just, to me, it's slippery.
Well, we do have the rule of law, and we do have very specific antitrust laws on the books, and the degree of enforcement depends a whole lot on the political predisposition of the president in power, because he seems to, or she seems to, control what the Department of Justice pursues or does not pursue if they choose to. So I do think, Stu, there'd have to be some level of violation per the existing laws, and then you can seek remedies. And I think just the process of bringing charges, even if you lose, puts people on warning as to the unmitigated, unfettered use of the power of a monopoly. So there is some check and balance there. We don't have a lot of enforcement going on over the last
Yeah,
20 years.
yeah.
Market competition has been
Yeah.
pretty good. Go ahead, Pete. Excuse me.
I suppose John D. Rockefeller didn't think Standard Oil of New Jersey could ever be touched, but it was.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah, it was.
absolutely.
It was, and it's turned into a bunch of different companies. The same way with AT&T. I don't think it's impossible to imagine these Google or these people getting into trouble uh, under the law. But I'm not an expert or even knowledgeable about the antitrust laws, but they're on the books. You're right, and it's a complicated world, complicated uh, matter of law.
And presidents tend to respond to issues that the public is concerned about. So if suddenly a bunch of people are feeling abused by their iPhone owners, I think then they begin looking for, is there anti-competitive behavior, and can we,
Yeah,
but it does, in a funny way, it does respond to the masses, how they feel about companies.
Do you guys remember the Supreme Court case uh that was based, I think, in a Colorado, it was like a cake shop, some small business owner who refused to sell their services to a LGBT, a gay person. I think they would
Yeah.
not make a cake for a gay person, and they
Right.
said, all right, to choose who we
well,
want.
that wasn't antitrust. That was a anti-discrimination case, I
Yeah,
think.
correct. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
it was about baking a cake.
Yeah,
I
but
think.
I
Yeah,
was gonna make a point, but
yeah,
about that, because that case was used in somebody's description years later for social media censorship, and
yeah,
they were basically saying that, big tech companies, and this was before Elon bought Twitter, and lots of conservative voices were being censored, and users were being kicked off social media. And the justification was actually that Facebook could remove people from their platform because, in the same way that this baker or the baker in Colorado could refuse service to somebody who didn't agree with their views. And I think that's an example of where the law it seems like the law is impossible to apply to these big tech companies, because I saw this case being used, the Colorado Baker case, and they're basically saying that this small business is the same as Facebook. Like, Facebook is the same law applies to this small business as it does to Facebook. And so Facebook, being a private company, can decide that they do not agree with the views of somebody and then remove them off of their platform. And to me, that
But
was,
there's a huge difference, man. The baker did not refuse to allow that person to come in and buy a cake. They could have bought whatever cake they wanted to. What he refused to do is make a specific cake
and it was
that
like a wedding.
celebrated something that went against his religion. And so, all that lady had to do is buy the blue cake instead of the pink cake or what have you. And so that's the distinction. Facebook just says, forget it, you're off 100%. You can't go buy the blue cake.
No, but I would disagree with you on that, because Facebook says, no, you can still use our platform, but you can't say any of the things that you have to say what we want you to say, essentially. That's how I think of it. Yeah, sure. We're not kicking you off of Facebook, but you can't talk about X, Y, and Z and P and Q.
Well,
That's
what about those people who say they're deplatformed?
what about deplatforming?
Yeah, that means they're kicked off.
Correct. I'm saying from the Facebook point of view, it's a symbol. They're using that. They're using this Supreme Court case of the Colorado bakery. Facebook is using that to defend themselves against
Right.
against people who are
But
being.
they're eliminating you from their platform. They're deplatforming you. So you can't even buy the blue cake.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, correct. Yeah, I see what you're saying. But I thought that was a super interesting. This is not really related to the antitrust thing at all, but that's
No.
always what, when I think of, that was one of the moments where I realized it's really going to be impossible for these companies to be prosecuted by the law. Like I feel like they're above prosecution if they want to be. If they can compare Facebook to a tiny small business, if we say Twitter, which has become the de facto public square, if that's just like a small, if they're following the same laws as like a small business operator in northern Colorado or wherever it was.
Lakewood.
It was in Lakewood?
It was, yeah. And by the way, Matt, there's about 100 other bakeries that lady could have gone to get a cake baked. She knew that this guy was a religious guy and went to buy a cake there to make a point. And where there's not 100 other Facebooks that you can go to raise your platform.
No, I totally agree. And I'm saying that's the problem. Like how can the government say, and we're getting way off topic, but I don't think we can consider Facebook. Facebook to me is much closer to PG&E than to a bakery, a small business bakery in Lakewood. Yet the law treats Facebook like it's the small business bakery and not like PG&E. PG&E cannot say, Matt, you're a Democrat. We disagree with your political views. We're going to shut off your power, right? We've agreed that that's a basic right. And there's laws protecting companies utility companies from providing you service.
Yeah. Well, that's about the 14th Amendment, freedom of speech. That's a whole, I don't know. I think it's different, but maybe it isn't.
What do you think is different about it?
Because there's certain limits to freedom of speech. You can't, as a classic example, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. So there are things you can't do under the guise of freedom of speech, and that's the problem, I suppose, the Facebook and others face when they try to censor somebody that wants to just make their speech free or whatever.
Yeah, correct. But they don't. That's the problem. Facebook has a more regulations on top of just incitement to violence. Like it's also denial of violent historical events. If you read the actual terms of service of Facebook, it's super political. Like the speech that they consider to be allowed is not the same as like the First
Amendment. I've never.
You might be the only person in America who's read that.
Certainly among this, in my room, I have.
Right, you always read all of the terms of service, right? You never just click that box that says agree and continue without reading everything. Okay, anyways, moving on. Speaking of, okay, well, we were just talking about big major companies and Apple and Microsoft being on the same board of OpenAI. Both of them kind of, to me, it looks like they're kind of like fake being on the board. Like they're obviously involved, but they're not. They're trying to kind of stave off a antitrust lawsuit, and so that'll be interesting to follow. But OpenAI is kind of the company that's taking over the world right now. It's the hottest AI. It's what everybody's using. Their unreleased text to video creator, Sora, which we've looked at before, is going to completely change probably reality as we know it, when you can create high definition videos just from a line of text. They haven't even released it yet, even though it's ready, because they're so afraid, I think, of what it's going to do to public discourse, especially during an election year. But one of the guys that I follow on Twitter, Scott Adams, who's the creator of the Dilbert comic strip, had a very interesting experiment that he did with ChatGPT. Now, if you don't know Scott Adams, obviously you probably know the Dilbert comic, but he's also a hypnotist, a trained hypnotist.
Oh.
He said that he's been playing with ChatGPT, and he trained ChatGPT on how to use specific hypnotic tricks. And so he trained ChatGPT to hypnotize him.
Oh my God.
And he did it, and he said it was successful. And it was just I want to show you this video of him talking about it.
Wait a minute. Is he going to hypnotize us? Just a minute.
No hypnotizing here. He said, and this is from
Just a minute.
this is from a story. He said,
Oh, okay. I'm just kidding.
he said that he won't. He said, Dilbert Scott Adams says he hypnotized himself with ChatGPT. Quote, "It's far too dangerous to share," Scott Adams asserted. Claims he trained ChatGPT to perform hypnosis, which he reportedly used on himself with profound effects. He said, he said, quote, "You have no idea what's coming." Adams also recounted his experience on a podcast describing how he taught the AI language model various persuasion techniques, which he refers to as waking hypnosis. This form of hypnosis doesn't involve a trance state, but instead uses words to influence individuals in a forceful manner. "I wondered if I could teach ChatGPT hypnosis," he said. "So I taught it some persuasion techniques. I call it waking hypnosis." Adam said he would interrupt the AI's responses to introduce new techniques or to refine existing ones. And what's interesting now about ChatGPT, the latest update, is it not only remembers what you've told it in the individual thread that you're working on, but it can remember everything in multiple threads. So basically underneath your account, it saves your individual chats. Now it can actually it can understand all of your chats, or it can remember the history of all of your chats, which makes it much more powerful. But he said, quote, "I had the most profound experience," Adams told his followers, quote, "It gave me an experience that was beyond psychedelics, was basically that powerful, and it did it instantly, and it could do it as long as I wanted." So anyways, I wanted to just show a short clip of him talking about it, because I haven't heard of anybody using AI in this way before. For hypnosis. So he's a pretty talented guy, but he's a hypnotist and a expert in persuasion. And so he's been training his ChatGPT on both of those things. And he's concerned. Share sound. Okay. Let's see here.
So good. Well, we will, of course, talk about all things political and Trump, but I thought I would give you this breaking news first, in addition to the documents case. So, by the way, I don't know yet. Does that mean that there can never be another prosecution for that? Or does it mean it's delayed past, anything would be delayed past, I don't know, or you'd have to get Democrats in power?
Sorry, I'm not, maybe I had the timestamp wrong.
Waking hypnosis.
Oh, there we go.
So not the kind of All right, last night I had this idea. I wonder if I could teach ChatGPT hypnosis.
Can you guys hear that? All right.
Yep.
Yes.
So I taught us some persuasion techniques. I'll call it waking hypnosis. So not the kind of hypnosis where you put somebody in a so-called trance, but the kind where you just affect them with your words in an unusually forceful way. And so I taught it some techniques of persuasion, and then I had it test it by turning it on me to see if it could use those techniques of persuasion. And then as it would use a technique, I'd interrupt it and say, "Oh, here's another technique to wrap on top of that, and maybe intermix with what you're already doing." And then I'd interrupt it again, say, "Okay, you're doing a great job, but maybe you could add this technique as well." And it started stacking techniques until I had about 6 of them. And I got to tell you, you have no idea what's coming. Now, I know everybody says that about AI, but they're talking about different, aspects of it. I trained ChatGPT to give me an experience which is reproducible, by the way. It would be easy to just have it do it again. And by the way, ChatGPT now remembers what you tell it from one session to another. So it now knows, but only in my account, I think. I don't think that means all of ChatGPT knows. I think only in my account, it learns some weapons grade persuasion. And when it turned it on me, I had the most profound experience. Now, there's no way to explain it to you. It was an experience. I know it's reproducible because it was so powerful. And what it was is I always wondered what would happen if somebody knows what I know and used it on me. And I experienced that. I've never experienced that before. And oh my God, was it powerful. Now I'll tell you the domain. The domain was, I told it to make me feel good. I said, persuade me to feel good. And I know what you're going to ask. You're going to say, what's the prompt? What prompts did you give it to make this happen? And the answer is, I will never tell you those prompts. They are way too dangerous. Dangerous because it will absolutely take over your brain. It gave me an experience that is beyond psychedelics. It was basically that powerful. And it did it instantly, and it could do it as long as I wanted. It instantly put me in a state of bliss, and it could keep me there as long as I wanted. It was unfrickin' believable.
So, what do you guys think about that? I thought it was very interesting use of. I haven't heard anybody use it in that way, and there's a lot of interesting things about
It's
that.
a little vague. I couldn't understand what it was that it did.
Yeah, he's kind of keeping that close to the chest and leaving it up to our imagination.
Stu,
Yeah,
I think I agree, but I came to the conclusion I think he did have this experience, and I think it was profound. And I think if we did some research, we would find what keys there are to induce somebody to be persuaded. And this is Chuck, who has zero knowledge on this, but I would have started with something. Well, please give me an experience and an interface that helps me feel much more euphoric and much happier based on my need for approval, or something like that. And then you said, now, ChatGPT, add another element to that, which deals with my sexuality and my need and adrenaline that I get from sexuality. Add that. And then now that he's done it, now the third, and I'm saying, Stu, that I don't think it's I'm suggesting I don't think it's highly complex, but I think the techniques by which you influence people who are listening to you, would be techniques that people who are in the prisoner of war interrogation system would know exactly. So, anyways, I too thought it was too vague, but that's what came out of my imagination, Stu, when I wondered what was going on in his descriptor.
Oh, I trust that he had this euphoria bliss experience. I, he didn't give me enough information to understand what he was talking about.
Yeah,
No.
well, he said that, so he asked Chad GPT to persuade him to make him feel happy, right? I think that was his initial prompt. And so my initial reaction is, okay, I use Chat GPT almost every day. I actually have now been using Perplexity more than Chat GPT. Perplexity has now completely replaced Google searching for me. And it's so much better. It's not even close. So that is an aside. But Chat GPT has a very specific mode, and that was really improved recently with its latest release, which is voice mode, which almost creates exactly the movie Her, if you've seen that movie, where Scarlett Johansson is the voice assistant. And so my gut when he was saying that said that he was using
Oh,
that mode, because I don't think reading, or even having have you guys used the voice mode, not just text to speech, because there's two different ways. You can have it read the answer to you, but it sounds kind of like robotic. If you go into the voice mode, you can actually choose whose voice you want. And one of them sounds exactly like Scarlett Johansson. She actually, I think, is like trying to sue them because they use her likeness. But I would assume that's the mode he was using. Now the prompts, who knows? But I will say, if you haven't, try using the voice mode, like the specific voice, and I'll see if I can pull it up. It's easiest on your phone. If you download the Chat GPT app, and you don't even have to have the paid version. But there is something that clicks in your brain when you realize when the AI sounds like a human, and it sounds like a woman, and it's an attractive, cheerful,
well,
happy sounding woman. Uh, the things it does to your brain is completely different than when you're just reading the text on the screen. And so I can totally see how with a few cues, it can be profound. So now he's an expert in this stuff, so I'm sure he was able to really ramp it up to, the best levels of persuasion or hypnosis or whatever the waking. He said it was waking hypnosis. Have you guys ever been hypnotized before?
No, not me. Not that I know
Carl,
of.
I was hypnotized.
Maybe I was. I just didn't
my
know
wife must have because I got nervous.
it.
Well, yeah, I was hypnotized once at a fair, and it definitely works in my opinion. I don't think it's like a magical thing. I think it's just kind of like it tricks your brain in the same way that like entertainment tricks your brain into feeling something, or maybe eating good food makes you feel a little better for a second. That's kind of how I think of it. But yeah, if you want to try it for yourself, have a conversation, lay in your bed in a dark room, and just put your phone in Chat GPT voice mode and just talk to this AI and ask it anything. And I would say, don't ask it questions about the world. Like, I think so many people, especially myself, when I go to AI now, I'm usually asking it like Google questions. That's what I would say. Like, what's the weather in San Francisco? Or, who was the 15th president of the United States? Don't ask it trivia questions. Ask it philosophy questions, and maybe try to apply a filter to your own life. It's pretty amazing because you can literally have a conversation with this thing, like a full on, and it understands what you're saying, and it will talk to you like a human. Um, it makes you. I've had that experience, not even close to like the level of profundity that he's describing, but I've had a similar experience myself, just like in a dark room talking to it. It's talking about my problems, like in life. Hey, I'm stressed out about this. What could I do? I'm moving. And it's like it's been pretty amazing. So that's the Chat GPT voice mode. Let me see if I can.
I think Dilbert may have hypnotized you, Matt.
That's a kind of a, yeah, I just thought that was a super unique perspective. I haven't heard anybody talk about that because that is so powerful. You know, and we don't know the specifics of his experience. We know that it wasn't sexual because ChatGPT is not allowed to be sexual. Okay, so if that's I would assume that it wasn't. But yeah, here's the ChatGPT voice chat. I just want to show you guys the app. I don't know if you can see it. So this is the ChatGPT app. There's two ways you can type a message, kind of like a text. And so it's kind of hard to see, but there's a headphone icon. So it's not the microphone icon. The microphone icon will allow you to just text to type. So it'll be like kind of like when you're voice typing a text message, if you've ever done that. You need to click on the headphones button. And if you actually have good headphones, put on good headphones and do it. And if you have like the Apple Air noise canceling or something, it really will and turn off the lights. I'm serious. And if you type, so this is it. You press this and it goes into a different mode. It goes into this. And so let's see. Hold on. Hey,
It
chat.
sounds like you're referring to a device or application switching modes unexpectedly.
Hold on one sec. I'm gonna ask it the question that he just said. Hey, can you persuade me to feel happy?
Sure. Think about something that makes you smile, like a favorite memory or something you're looking forward to. Sometimes just taking a moment to breathe deeply and think about what you're grateful for can lift your mood. What usually makes you happy?
I love playing basketball. I love golfing with my dad. I love skiing with my wife.
That's awesome. Those sound like really fun activities that you share with people you care about. Just thinking about those good times and the joy they bring can be really uplifting. What's one of your favorite memories from playing basketball or skiing with your wife?
Okay, so I'm gonna pause it right there. The cool thing is you can pause it at any point, and it also keeps a transcript of everything you've said, so you can look back on it. But already right there, that was working for me. I was like thinking of those memories. I was like, you know what? That actually does make me kind of happy to think about playing golf with my dad or skiing with my wife.
Awesome.
And
Interesting.
right there, I know for a fact if you throw a professional person who knows how to persuade people and use hypnosis to make them feel better, I can only imagine how powerful the experience could be. So anyways, that's a little teaser. That's kind of cool. Were you guys able to hear that okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
I could.
So,
Interesting.
If I was a therapist, I would start wondering, oh my gosh, are they going to be able to outsource my job with AI? I didn't think that was possible.
Yeah,
I think they already
yeah, it
have.
might be. It might be the end of it.
I think
Practice.
therapists. My wife just read a book on it's called Bad Therapy. It's about how it's a one therapist perspective on how therapy has become too common for people. Some interesting perspectives in the book. But my wife has gone through some serious um therapy related issues, interpersonal relationships, kind of family drama and stuff. And the first time I used ChatGPT, I put in a specific situation that she was in uh, and asked for advice, like you would ask advice to a therapist. And I'm not kidding, it gave the best advice that I have ever heard. And we had been talking about this situation, trying to figure out the best way forward, what's the best way to minimize bad feelings on both sides. And it was amazing. So you should absolutely not just limit your use of ChatGPT to informational pursuits or trivia answers or Google searches. Play around with the mind of ChatGPT. You could already see this was happening. I love when you can get ChatGPT to prompt you to answer things. That's always a good way to test the power of it. If you can ask it a question and it starts to ask you questions, that means that means you've tapped into a good way to use ChatGPT. Okay, we're almost, we got a minute left. Oh, I forgot to mention, I should say this before we leave. Google researchers say they have simulated the emergence of life. Um, so that's obviously a sensational.
Really?
And it's a non-peer reviewed study. But in an experiment, this is from, yeah, this is from Google. In an experiment that simulated what would happen if you left a bunch of random data alone for millions of generations, Google researchers say they witnessed the emergence of self-replicating digital life forms. And their findings, published as a yet-to-be peer-reviewed study, could mirror, or at least shed light on, the emergence of actual biological life. So they did some, this is totally sensational. This is not backed up by anything, but I mean, it was too good of a headline to not include in the discussion. Because it's like, we're talking about all this stuff and it's like, oh, Google may have disproved the existence of God. I don't think that's true, but very interesting thing. They did some experiment and yeah, I don't know how you even do this experiment. They said they simulated what would happen if you left a bunch of random data alone for millions of generations. And then somehow that data started creating new data, and new data created new data, and so on and so forth. But anyways, that's all I got for you.
Oh,
That's an hour.
well, that's
Hopefully you hopefully I got something in your brain that you can think
yeah,
about.
well, you did that.
I feel happier.
Yeah, me
Glad to be
too.
with you
Honestly,
guys.
I need to get
Glad
out
to
of
be
here.
Okay,
with you.
thank you.
Cheers.
See y'all.
See you later.